As surely as the sun shines on the Ohio River each day, the citizens of Owensboro awake to work, play, and live in a community rich with benefits and opportunities for its residents. Paramount among these is education. The people of Owensboro, Daviess County, and its surrounding communities enjoy educational opportunities as plentiful as anywhere in the Commonwealth. But it hasn't always been this way. The educational benefits the people of Owensboro and Daviess County enjoy today were born out of efforts begun 25 years ago when a small group of community residents and leaders, at the request of Mayor Waitman Taylor, met one evening at City Hall and formed what is today the Citizens Committee on Education.
My name's Larry Miller, and I'm a proud retiree of the Owensboro Community and Technical College. I was here for over 30 years, and I'm really pleased and proud to be able to today be able to interview 4 of our founders of the college. We have Malcolm Bryant and Tom Alvey, and also Don Blanford, and also Michael Fiorillo.
The rate of people going on into college for a lot of reasons, and one being that they couldn't really afford college and they wouldn't have an opportunity to go. And I think that was the crutch of one of the biggest reasons why we wanted a community college here. And another one was for industrial development, you know, to turn out people that they can come in and would be ready to go into industry. You know, somebody that they wouldn't have to train from ground zero. So I think that was a whole lot of the reasoning.
Yeah, Owensboro's on-to-college rate it lagged way behind other cities in the state and other states. And we were initially looking for a way to improve that on-to-college rate. And we actually investigated a lot of options, not just a community college. That's the one we landed on. But Tom's right, it was how do we get kids to go on to college and not tune out after high school?
Yes, I think our on-to-college rate was in the 16% rate for graduating seniors from our schools. And the state of Kentucky was ahead of that. Certainly the national average, I think today is about 28 or 30%. So I credit our leadership with not zeroing in and saying, here's what we need to do, but they presented the idea, the opportunity for that. And I think at the time, Owensboro and Daviess County was really hungry for some success in a lot of things. And our economic development wasn't operating at a high speed. I think our unemployment rate was in the teens, possibly. Our downtown was having troubles. And our private colleges were doing fine, but it seemed like if you were talking to a person to go to higher education and stay in Owensboro, it was either a private college, you might as well have been talking about Harvard, as opposed to a community college or a public rate that was going to be $25, $30 a credit hour as compared to $100 plus. So I think our leadership really had such vision to say, let's present the opportunity and the problem without a direct answer. And John Hager and Roger McCormick and these team of great people, men and ladies that were with us, threw that out very transparent to the community and to our great leadership in Don and said, help us find the answer to that.
This group at one time, I had no input into the group, but they had done a yeoman's job in putting together a package, what they thought was good for the community. And at some point they approached me. I happened to be Speaker pro tem at that time in the Kentucky legislature. And they approached me and said, what's the chance of us getting a community college? And I said, well, I'll let you check it out. After checking it out, I thought it could be done, but it's going to be hard. And but anyway, they gave me the impetus to proceed and to try to at least to get a community college here, which we were successful in. And this group was the impetus that put it all together and came to me with the package.
I don't know if you remember or not, Don, but one of our first meetings was downtown. I think it's a Brescia student center now, but it was a bank then. And there was like 9 of us, all the original ones we was in the basement talking. And Martha Lane Collins was governor. Times was hard in Kentucky. Money was tight. And John posed the question, how are we going to come up with the money to get a community college? I told him, I said, we got one of the most influential people in the state of Kentucky within stone's throw of where we're sitting. And he said, well, why don't you get us a meeting with Don? I said, okay. This was on a Friday night. Monday, he met with us at Gabe's. And we kind of presented what we were trying to do and what we thought we could do and what kind of money we thought we'd have to have. And after a long spiel, Don said, okay, I'll get the money. And that's kind of what gave us a spur, to believe that we could maybe pull this off.
I guess to step back into the community conversation originally is maybe even before there was a citizens committee on education, there happened to be a community meeting. And I don't know if the chamber initiated it or what, but it was about education and what's next and what can we do. And we invited the Council on Higher Education, I think Don, it was their name. And there was a fellow executive director named Harry Snyder, I believe. And so we had kind of a community meeting. And at the end of that, after we threw up all the ideas, and all the complaining and all that, Harry Snyder stood up from Frankfort or Central Kentucky, wherever they were located, and said, Owensboro is an incredible town in Davis County. And you all have so many entrepreneurial ideas, but you can't ever seem to make up your mind. And at that point, I think he threw out the challenge to the community to make up their mind about education in this case and let the Council on Higher Education know. And I think John Hager and some of them were challenged by that direct, objective comment, and the community was. And it kind of rallied us to say, let's make up our mind. And one thing Owensboro likes to do that I've learned is they like to win. And we don't have or at the point didn't have the interstates running through our community. UK's not in the backyard. It's not a huge airport. And so normally we had to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps, and we were great at that. And whether it's a community college or a bridge or a downtown, I think Owensboro likes to be challenged. And I think that was a pivotal day where he challenged us to make up our mind.
Was it Waitman Taylor that stood up and nominated John Hager and Roger McCormick
Exactly. Great
to chair a committee?
That's a great history because, Waitman and his great character stood up and said, well, I'm tired of hearing all that. I appoint John Hager and Roger McCormick to be chairman and figure this out. And you're right, Mike.
That was a great Waitman, no.
Yeah, and that was a great memory wonderful memory you have there. And I think John and Roger were the perfect people to start that because they came from kind of different parts of the community. And that was wonderful. Great night.
When the Citizens Committee on Higher Education was created at that meeting in Owensboro, and Morton Holbrook chaired that meeting. He was then on the Kentucky Council on Higher Education, and he basically recognized that this was a continuing concern and issue for Owensboro, Davis County. And he basically said, well, you've got to tell us what you want. At that point, Waitman Taylor, one-time mayor of Owensboro, stood up and said, I'd like to nominate John Hager and Roger McCormick to chair a committee to figure out what it is that we need in Owensboro, Davis County. So that was how the committee was created. And John asked me if I was willing to be on that committee, and I said I was. So you had already set up a dynamic in which the newspaper was doing something which was a little bit different than it normally does.
But that at that point in time, we hadn't settled on a community college yet.
No.
And the committee just started investigating all the options. And fortunately, Roger and John kept that committee moving and making sure that it met regularly and did research and discussed the options. We were fortunate that John Hager and Marjorie had the newspaper resources at hand, and you know, they put a lot of time and effort into it. They let their employee David Boink virtually serve as the executive director of the committee on their payroll.
Yeah, I thought it was admirable that's the way we started out, and it wasn't 5 white guys sitting down at the mayor's office telling everybody, here's what we ought to do. And it was so refreshing, and I didn't know what that refreshing was to that conversation, but it was incredible as young people that we are or were, that we learned that strategy. And I think it's benefited Owensboro for a long time to have those transparent, open discussions, because I'm sure Tom and Don can talk more to the consternation that came with the community accepting the different options, you know, and even Henderson, who had a community college, was at the table fighting tooth and nail for us not to have one. And Don probably got the biggest piece of that conversation. But I was really proud of our community standing their ground and being transparent with what might work.
The objections, when I think even the higher education committee kind of had maybe an unwritten sense that they didn't want any more community colleges. I heard that several times, you know.
I believe Morton Holbrook was on the Council on Higher Education at the time.
Yeah.
And Morton suggested a community college was needed in Owensboro. And there was another member of the committee, I think a former governor who shall remain nameless, said, "Over my dead body." And Morton kind of took that to heart.
I think we heard that numerous times in a lot of different language.
Yes.
Don definitely heard it in Frankfurt.
Mhm.
I think one of the things that helped you was, didn't the governor have an educational package that you wanted passed?
Oh, exactly.
So I
She
think
had something I wanted, and I had something she wanted.
That's right.
And she had lost her education package, and I had had just a little bit to do with it. I didn't think we had gotten enough for senior high and Davis County and Apollo, and so I was at least somewhat instrumental in killing her education package. And she called me and said, "Don," said, "that's my legacy. I'll have to pass the thing." She said, "Bobby can't do it for me." Bobby was the speaker. And she said, "I've heard you may be able to." And I said, "Well, I'll see what I can do if you'll help me." And she said, "Will you meet with me privately somewhere outside of Frankfurt?" And I said, "Yeah." And I had a friend that had a home outside of Frankfurt. And I called him. I said, "Hey, we'll use your home sometime on a Sunday afternoon, and where I can meet with the governor." And he said, "Yeah, sure." So I called him back and I said, "Hey, meet me out here at this home outside of Frankfurt on a certain Sunday afternoon." And she and Doc, her husband, came and said, "Don," said, "this is my legacy. I've got to have this education package." She had been around the state on helicopters all trying to sell it. But anyway, she said, "I've heard you may be able to pass it for me." I said, "Well, I'll try, but I need something, Governor. I need the community college for Owensboro." She said, "How much?" And I said, "Well, the local group had put together a package, and they're throwing the figure around of $13 million. I think probably 12 for the college, the brick and mortar, and 3 for operating expense or whatever." And so she left there and she said, "You pass my package and I'll give you the community college." So I had no problem whatsoever with the money then. When all the problems got up about the local group couldn't decide where they're going to put it and all that, said, "Don, is that going to bother us? Is that going to hurt us in Frankfurt?" It's not going to hurt us. The money's there. And so anyway, that was kind of how it went down. And then of course, she put in the, incidentally, I went back and did pass her education package. And she did put the money, or had the money in the budget for the community college for Owensboro. And she passed her thing. I even flew around the state with a helicopter with her to help her sell her package. And she, like I say, she stuck to her word. She stuck to my, one Sunday afternoon, she called me on a Saturday afternoon, I was at home. She said, can you come to Frankfurt on Sunday? And I said, well, I wasn't coming up till Monday. And she said, I need to come up Sunday. I said, okay. So I walked in her office, and here's this whole office full of people. They were all cabinet secretaries. This was when the governor put together a package to present to the legislature for money for all these people. And when I walked in, she said, Don, these people tell me we can't balance the budget with that $13 million out of it. She said, can we get 7 now and 7 next million? I said, no. I said, we're going to get the first 13, we're going to get the whole 1,300, 13 million. And she said, okay, that's the end.
Appearing before the Council on Higher Education, one of the gentlemen on our 7 or 8 committee was Tom Albee. And at that time, it was pretty bleak here in Owensboro in terms of economic development, downtown, the need to restructure that, reconstruct that. Tom Albee made the statement that bringing a community college to Owensboro, Davis County, and surrounding counties was more important than any industry that we could possibly bring into the Owensboro area. And I think it was right on target.
Well, my interest was jobs, you know, and new industry. And the only way you can attract new industry is to have good people. And in order to have good people, they got to have education. And education has got to be affordable from the bottom to the top. You know, everybody's got to be able to afford to get an education. And we have to build a network of people. When an industry come in here, you'd have somewhere to draw from. And that was my big draw.
Who asked you to get involved?
Dave Boyd.
Dave Boyd, okay.
Well, I came to the Messenger and Choir in 1978, and it was pretty clear from the very beginning that low-cost higher education for Owensboro, Davis County was a real priority for John Hager. And he had a view which I think was prescient in the sense that even back in those early days in the late 1970s, he saw our economy as shifting to an information economy. And he didn't want the people in Davis County to be left behind. You know, we had higher education, but it was not always an education that everyone could afford. And so he wanted to see whether there were ways in which we could bring that kind of low-cost higher education into Davis County.
I was green, and I didn't really understand civic engagement at all. I grew up in a real small town and went to university, and I think John Hager and David Boink guided at least myself and maybe a lot of us through that kind of conversation. I think it was enlightening to me how passionate people could be about where they live. And Don, with his story, is so incredible to be such a servant leader like that. And I think it's taken us 40 years to maybe even bring out some of these stories, and because they love this community. But I think I was amazed at the people in that room and how they would spend their time at 7 o'clock at night till bedtime to weekly, if not twice a week, intense conversation for a couple of years at least about goodness for this community. And I think that's about the time I really fell in love with this community, to understand the passion and the understanding of how they could make a difference. And the more you were around that group, you really started to believe. And Don helped us believe, and Tom helped us believe when the labor side came. And there were a lot of people in that room that weren't, I would predict, weren't lunch partners every day. And for the common good, it was incredible to sit back and be amazed at the greatness that could come 30, 40 years later. And I don't think I ever really understood at the time what a community college could do for a community.
My part was getting the bricks and mortar money. And what has happened out here since then has just been awesome.
It became apparent, that's when it became apparent to me, that there were so many people in Owensboro who were place-bound. They had to stay in Owensboro for family reasons, for financial reasons. They could not leave and pack up and go off to college and law school like I did. And they were people who, for the most part, could not afford the private colleges. And they probably didn't have the test scores in the high school grades to get into the private colleges. And those people were stuck. No place that they could go. And, you know, when we had one of the early experts that did some research for us, projected based on his study of the Owensboro community that we could have a community college, and within 5 years, we could have a student population of 5,200 people. I thought, wow, wow, there are that many people out there that are place-bound and need a place to go to school that they can afford and that they can get into. And I kind of, they were right. I look out here and see all these people now that are able to go to school and get a degree. And you can go all over Owensboro and Davis County and talk to people, and they say, I went to community college and I got my certificate at the community college. It's made a difference.
You know, all the work that went into this community college and everything that was done, and when everything came to a point to where we was going to have a community college, I think everybody's first thought failed to, are we going to have anybody going? Is anybody going to sign up? And when the first year there was 1,800 people, I mean, it was a gift. You know, it just showed the need, you know, and it just grew from there.
I think it was so enlightening to me to understand what a non-traditional student was. And most of us, you know, you go to college when you get right out of high school and then you go to work. And I think a large percentage of our student population from the beginning and certainly till now was the dad who had need to get some different skills, the mom who was trying to raise 2 kids and need to, you know, get a job, whether it be in medical or administrative or whatever it might be. I was amazed at the number of people who were just coming back to get skills midlife. And I don't know how many people I talked to that were out here taking 2 or 3 classes. And it's such a diverse, dynamic place that can be so nimble to the needs of a community. And that's why it's called a community college. And
local colleges and even the statewide colleges, they found, as he said, it's been a feeder system for them. People go here for education, and then they go on into Westland and Brescia and the UK and so forth. So, and at that point, as it proved to be a feeder system, that's when the community education committee, I think, came together finally and recognized, hey, Owensboro did a good job doing that.
We started with absolutely nothing, and we're having a difficult time getting organized, getting our feet on the ground and taking off. And John Hager loaned us $5,000 the first year to get started. And so our first job was to raise the money to pay back John. But over the years, that foundation has grown. We're now raising hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. We have multi-million-dollar endowments. And we're able to do a terrific favor to students to help support them with scholarships, with emergency student loans, with a food bank. And that, I think, has really made a difference in the college and the ability of these students to succeed and make this work. So I'm really proud of where the foundation is.
You know, to show you how this college feeds the community, it's not just big industry that they try to help. My son's a vet here in Owensboro, and they was having a hard time with vet techs. And Dr. Leach retired and come out here to community college to teach, and got a program going for vet techs to help feed them. So it's not just a big industry that the community college is interested in helping. They'll help, you know, small groups, small industries. And so I think it just kind of feeds from the ground up, you know.
Mentioned John Hager. He had always been nice to me, but never overly nice. I had come up to the labor ranks, and he was always more of the business type. But when he saw and was a big mover of the community college, when I got involved with that, he became my best friend. He hugged me every time he saw me, and he was a big mover in this community college. I mean, that newspaper helped. It's the only newspaper in the state that did help. And but he and I became the very best friends when the community college system, our community college finally started taking off.
Well, I think every story has a beginning and an end, and of course the community college story hasn't ended yet. But as far as the progression, John, I think, kind of led the fight, and talking for myself, he kind of pulled me along in the process, and I think, like, John was the beginning of the story and Don finished it for us, so and there's so many people in between there that had their own talent and their own perspectives and what they could add, and nothing was left out. Everybody's opinion was brought into the discussion.
I've told people a number of times, I don't think the community college would be here if it were not for Morton Holbrook, John Hager, and Don Bradford.
Absolutely.
But Bill Chandler has to be on that list too. Bill had a lot of influence around Owensboro. He knew a lot of people. He was well respected, and he took some stands on the Citizens Committee that may not have been politically popular at times, but he always wanted to do the right thing. And he was very instrumental in getting the college here, but even more importantly, when it was a fledgling community college, Bill Chandler took it to raise. He came out here and spent hour after hour after hour of his personal time grooming administrators and helping them with their issues. And he had so much experience and so much wisdom that people at the college really valued his opinion. And when they got into something new that they hadn't dealt with before and weren't sure how to handle it, they'd call Bill, and he'd get in the car and come out and spend all the time they needed.
Bill came from a farming family in Webster County, I think. Is that right, Don?
Mm-hmm.
Had an agricultural background and knew hard work, and had worked himself up to be the superintendent of our Owensboro public school system. Did a wonderful job. And I think maybe in the early days, Mike is right. Bill took some of those blows from the community college folks that a lot of us dodged. And he was the best person to be out there, because when he knew something was right, like Tom and these gentlemen have said, he stuck with it. And Mike's so correct. Some of us, especially myself, after we broke ground and did all the ceremonial stuff, kind of went back to work. And Bill stayed with it. And I think started our foundation, was probably chair of it early days, and just stayed with it till the day he passed away. And he was just outstanding. And we had some great females: Betty Taylor, Jeannie Owen Miller, Esther Jansing, who really brought a lot of wisdom from the education side to us that were more interested in the brick and mortar kind of team. So Bob Darrell from Wesleyan was very influential. But I think with John and Dave Boink having the newspaper, Tom talked about we had those open conversations in our meeting. I think it was John's interest to have that open conversation with the community. So it wasn't just our little private meetings. He wanted to bring that conversation out to everyone. And it was healthy and enlightening, and I think energetic for the community.
He was a past executive director of the Council of Higher Education, past president of Northern Kentucky Universities. He not only knew education, higher education, but he knew the politics of it. And I remember his report to us quite vividly. It was very simple. He said, you can opt to seek for the development of the school subsidy route, or you can seek a community college. And he said, if you're patient and want to wait another couple of decades, then you take the first one. If you want something to happen soon, you go after a community college.